not trying, you'll never know what you can actually achieve. I think sometimes we're so fast to be our own biggest critic, but when was it ever okay or not okay to be our own biggest cheerleader? Sometimes you just need to do something entertaining. No matter how small you think it is, if that has brought you joy, own it. But often it's that destination or the project or everything being wrapped up in the most perfect way that actually stops people from starting or sharing.
I personally think that everybody's success is based on their relationship with failure. Yeah. And I think that the more comfortable you are with failing, the more success you'll achieve because you're not scared of falling.
The biggest challenge of leadership is absorbing pressure. If you're transparent and just blurting all your feelings out to everyone all the time, that can create stress for a team. The biggest task and burden of leadership is to take knowledge, absorb it, and be transparently where it's best placed.
You were recognised in Media Week's top 50 most influential and powerful creative leaders. What's one thing that you wish you knew prior to starting Bullfrog?
I think
Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really looking forward to this discussion.
It's a pleasure to be here. Excited to have a conversation.
I'm excited because I think one of the things that drew me to wanting to have you on this podcast was when I started my business, I started it out of the idea of I had so much experience with a lack of trust in the industry, a lack of honesty in the industry, and a lack of treating people like human beings. Why did you start Bullfrog?
I think they're two interesting points, right? In context of your own founder journey, as much as me starting Bullfrog was actually just a natural succession of my career to date, which has only been self-employed since leaving schooling. The natural progression for me was pretty much just knowing that storytelling is how I characterize it, and business building go beautifully in harmony together. Now, that's very fluffy. I've got a much nicer answer that my brilliant team at Bullfrog make sure our positioning does. But essentially, as me as an individual, I'm fascinated with the ability of communications and creativity and the commercial impact they have on business growth. I've been very lucky over the last 10, 11 years to have different experiences in different verticals and categories, be publishing and content as my first business, watching my beautiful wife build her health and wellness empire at Kick, which has been, an 8-9 year journey, and compounding efforts of reinvention, evolution, category disruption, technology to build to what is that brilliant company today led by Steph and Laura. And then ultimately Bullfrog is the coming together of all those things, is doing those things of storytelling and business building at scale with some of the largest, most innovative companies in the world, but equally my own personal passion and fusion after that 11-year journey been injected into my everyday. So I am super grateful every day I get to do what I love, and I get to do it with incredibly smart, to your point, people, and I see them as people first versus just time to be charged or a skill set to be charged. And ultimately, when you start to look at the whole picture in anything in life, you can find something really beautiful in it too.
Yeah, I agree. But why an agency? Because let me tell you, that is not the first job that comes to mind when people are like, I want to do my own thing, I want to make an impact on the world. And you haven't worked in an agency before. So it's not like you were naturally like, I want to change. Like my background, I spent 10 years in agency and I was like, this can be done better and I'm going to do it better. But why an agency?
See, it's interesting. Like a lot of people have a visceral reaction in market right now to the word agency. Often it comes with conflated, let's say, price points without much return. Is a genuine sentiment across the market right now, be, let's say, consultancy or professional services firms, if you were to put the whole category in a little bundle. But if we're talking about agency specifically, I didn't know, yes, I knew what agency was, but I didn't start it saying I'm starting an agency. I started it with a business that had a strong understanding of the value of what great creativity can do back to business and an actual lived experience in multiple verticals of delivering that. Yes, publishing is part the advertiser. There's some real nice synergies there to where I was to where I am now. Yes. but even the journey and the experience behind the scenes of watching Kick build and grow, and them being a very big part of Bullfrog's identity and growth as well, is a technology company growing powerfully through community and storytelling too. And so naturally you start to see that weave of, if I identify as an individual as a storyteller and business builder, and I'll do that for the rest of my life, the actual thread that wraps through that, and I've only just come to this based on, retrospectively looking at my whole career today, is the intention wasn't to start just an agency, because there's so many out there. I think from memory there's about 4,400 agencies registered in Australia.
Yeah.
And only a real handful that are at the top of the tree. And I feel super grateful to be in that ilk of conversation these days. But it actually just comes from a pure belief of the thing we're charged to do, or the thing that our partners, clients, people come to us for, is to realize untapped potential commercially and creatively on what that brand and business can achieve. Somewhere along the way, the industry has somehow forgotten that we're getting paid very well to solve complex problems with an answer they can't solve themselves. Yeah. And that sometimes deeply frustrates me, but it's also that simple. Yeah. And you just need to be human about it too. You need to have high standards of what, to be the best at what you do. You need to hold yourself to a high standards, both in values, but also delivery of what you're delivering. And I think often that is left on the wayside. And that experience has eroded trusts of some of the best businesses and brands in the world to now invest internally in themselves because they've lost assurance in the partners that they've brought on board.
Hey, just a quick one. If you are loving this episode, help us grow and reach more people by hitting the subscribe button and leaving a review. Yeah. So do you guys then, I was one of those people who had a visceral reaction to the word agency, right? Like I had a plethora of weird and sometimes confronting, sometimes awful experiences working within other agencies over the last 10 years. And when I started my business, again, my fundamental value was to help, right? All I wanted to do was to help people better understand how they can market their business, how they can use social media to build their business, and how they can build their personal brand to get the word out there about their business, right? But for so long, I fought the word agency because I was like, well, I don't want to be like them. Like I'm trying to be something different, but there was no better way to articulate to other people how it was what we did, other than a long-winded explanation of, what we do and who we help and why we help. So I ended up leaning into the word agency because I was like, the old saying, can't beat them, join them. And if I want to change the narrative, it has to be done from within, right? Like it has to be done, I'm an agency and I'm doing something differently. So do you guys refer to yourselves as an agency or no?
No, we call ourselves a creative business.
Creative business. Okay.
Not company because it sounds better, but just a creative business. Because we don't divorce ourselves from a commercial reality to our work, which obviously is in my answer prior. Yeah. And I think understanding the commercial landscape, the landscape beyond just the task at hand, gives you the best ability to solve that problem in really interesting ways. That's what creativity is. But creativity equally has lost its meaning in this industry too. Yeah. It's almost like seen as a cost center now at the C-suite. And when I mean the C-suite, not just the marketing function, but the CEO office as well, is an experimental factor versus actually a core intrinsic way that business can transform. Yeah. And we've got a big urge to push that. And our best work has come from those deeper embedded relationships that has that commercial acumen at the start of the process and the understanding of the entire landscape and different perspectives, inputs to make really interesting problems solvable in interesting ways. And I think that's a pursuit that we've been on from the get-go. And equally to your point before, we are an agency too. We might call ourselves a creative business, but we have just a rational belief on the type of experience that our partners will have with us. And that comes back to those points of really understanding the commercial realities of business, period, especially right now in a tough economic climate. And how we solve that is obviously with deep care and a lot of values on our sleeve, but equally making sure that we're hearing and listening to our partners and when we work with them, and not just assuming this is what worked for this person, this is what you're going to get today. Yeah. The world should be customized and personalized to the partner and the brand, never a cookie cutter approach. And sometimes that has been used in the past to create efficiencies and cost efficiencies, but we're not here to create cost efficiencies. Every problem is unique and every problem has a different answer.
Yeah. And deserves a different answer, right?
100%.
Now, before we get into you building your business, where did the name Bullfrog come from? Because I'm fascinated. I love brand stories.
It's an ugly frog, isn't it?
Hey?
It's a very ugly amphibian type
Yeah,
thing.
well, I'm just like, I'm keen to know if there's some kind of like story or narrative or anything that goes, I mean, I'm sure there is because you're a creative industry.
It's a funny story. But do you know what a group of bullfrogs is called?
No.
Not many people do. It's actually
Tell
an
me,
army.
educate me.
It's an army.
An army. Okay.
Now, I didn't like the name when I stumbled onto it. There was an initial exploration of being the pest of the agency landscape, which, maybe there's some parts of that true, especially not coming necessarily from the landscape prior or the category prior. However, what really sung true to me to come back to people is take army and just flip it on its other side for a second. An army is a bunch of individuals moving towards a shared mission, shared objective. And that's very much intrinsically actually in the fabric of Bullfrog and its DNA. That was the reason I stuck with the name. I looked at a few different other names, even hired another branding agency to give me a better name because I was way too close to it. And this was very early days. But ultimately it stuck because that felt very true to not only my personal mission, but a mission that people could buy into. A mission that not just is changing the fabric of, let's say, professional services category, but actually, if you're assembling a bunch of people to solve a problem, it's always in collaboration with partner and the internal people at Bullfrog. And when you bring those worlds together, you can achieve incredible things. And we've done that over the last 4 years. It blows my mind for some of the things that we've been able to create and the partnerships that we still have from the minute we started to where we are now, because we deeply care not only about the objective of what we're chasing after, be that commercial, marketing objectives, whatever it might be, is that we deeply care about the individuals at the core of it. And I think regardless of what people's opinions are as an army from an outsider coming in, I don't think people can argue of what the point of an army is, and that's to take market share, to grow and grow together. And I think that just resonated so strongly to me and still does to this day. But often people don't know that it's called an army, and I think that there's something interesting in that, but it's also something we talk about a little bit internally and a little bit with our clients because it is often the first question that is asked.
Totally. And I love it. I love like regardless of what the story is, like I love a brand that has a name and a story as to how they got to the name. What were some of the names that didn't get the green light?
It's almost like I can't even remember. Actually, honestly, I think
they're just left on the cutting room floor.
Yeah, I actually genuinely struggle to remember. And that sounds wild, but it has been a pretty wild and incredible 4 years.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest thing when I look at retrospectively is just the meaning and authenticity of what it means to you. And I think you do get a choice as a founder in doing that compared to just being employed at another company to hold a CEO office or a senior leadership position. You get to design it around what you truly believe in. But a vision is nothing if it's not shared. And I think intrinsically with our team and the people within it, there's a real personal care for each other and our partners. And that equally resonates really strongly with an army in itself. And I think it's taken a bit of time to realize some of those points, but our growth is not possible just on myself alone.
Of course.
Never. And I think what we've achieved is because a bunch of people took a big bet on someone that hadn't actually come from the industry before, and those people are still with me today, that they were like, there's something here, I'm going to explore it regardless of, the risk that could be associated. And ultimately, yes, we've proved that that care and that want and that hunger and attitude, along with paired with brilliant people, can achieve some really cool things. And I think I'm blessed with that every day. And I equally look at the people that I walk into and share a room with and our clients and partners that we work with right now, that I quite often pinch myself as a habit to make sure I'm stopping and reflecting to be like, what an incredible journey it's been. But I often, as the person that I am, as much as the team is too, I feel like we're also just getting started.
I can very much resonate with that. Now, running a people-first business successfully that is profitable is a challenge, right? As you said, majority of the industry charges by the hour. And that's how they can kind of manage the return. Where did you start when it came to actually building the business you have now, but then second to that, actually getting the word out there about what you guys were doing?
There's two parts of that question, right? There's the people first part, and that is one part of our journey, but it's not the defining part. It's a core part of who we are, as I've mentioned before, and how the experience at Bullfrog, and I think our partners would say that too, is that people definitely care because they're showing care to each other. But I also think to be people first, but also to be known as, let's say, a business, that its culture and the energy around it is part aware of that, but also it is a high-performing culture as well. Often I say to people, Bullfrog won't be for everyone because you might not care as the individuals as much as the individuals within it. Yeah. And that's okay. And I think when it comes to getting the word out there, I think it has to come back to that authenticity of the story that you're telling within, but the expectation. People first does not mean running around cuddling each other and just having the most fun. Yeah. We wouldn't have achieved the recognition of being one of the top independents in a short period of time without those individuals, yes, being brilliant, but wanting to apply their talent through effort and attitude. Yeah. But to do that, that means creating an environment of transparency, which is the biggest thing we've always had from the get-go, but being very honest from every layer down. Not that I necessarily believe in hierarchy fully. Yeah. However, I think the biggest thing that often people look at people first means that they don't want to perform at a certain level, and that is completely not true. Definitely not true at Bullfrog. The biggest thing that I pride ourselves on people first is that we run towards the tough conversation faster to then move on to what we're chasing after. Yeah. And I think you have to be able to have the tough conversations in a really human way, and often companies do not do that. Yeah. Not just in our industry, multiple industries. Yeah. Have really hard human conversations around the expectations so people know where they're going. Yeah. The biggest thing that breaks culture is ambiguity, lack of clarity. And ultimately, as an individual that wants to always evolve and always learn, sometimes I can also create that ambiguity. Yeah. But also it's in the pursuit of finding the answer faster. Yeah. And often that answer can't be created or can't be found without the solution coming from those people. And so there will always be unknowns in any business. Yeah. But I think when you approach it with honesty and transparency and be okay to have the hard conversations and ask them back, that's the biggest thing that I'm most proud of is at people coming into it, whether it's day one on the job or just out of uni, they are almost pushed to ask the harder question from the get-go because it's a safe space to do so. Yeah. And that is something I'm super grateful for at this team. And that is not just shown in our leadership team, but it's at every layer across the business. It is no ego. There is no risk of speaking your mind because if people don't speak their mind, we're not seeing them for the lived experience and the skill sets that they might be hiding away. Yeah. And I think you have to create a safe environment to do so, but one that isn't just resting on its laurels, but one that is happy to have the honest conversation because we know the benchmark is here. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the environment of, feeling safe is not something that the ad agency world is known for or the marketing landscape is known for. Yep. And I think that there's a lot of leaders within the industry that will, typically say, we're people first or we want to be really transparent with you. And then they go and do something the polar opposite of that. Where do you see transparency? Where do you see leaders going wrong when it comes to being transparent? Because I think saying to be transparent is it's a great thing. I think it's something that everyone should aim to be, but not a lot of leaders can do it because there's various kind of limiting beliefs that they have about themselves or there's various, I suppose, traditional mindsets that they might have in place. Where do you see leaders go wrong when it comes to getting transparency right?
I think just on the point of transparency that weaves into the answer, I just want to make it clear that transparency isn't vulnerability. No. And often people think it's the same thing. Yeah. Transparency is what I call almost a gear shift. Yeah. And leadership need to have a gear shift when they choose to be transparent or when they choose just not to share because it's not fair to share yet. Sure. And that's not being deceitful. That's not hiding anything. No. The biggest challenge of leadership is absorbing pressure. Yeah. Now, if you're transparent and just blurting all your feelings out to everyone all the time because you're being transparent, not vulnerable, that can create stress for a team.
Massively.
The biggest task and burden of leadership is to take knowledge, absorb it, and be transparently where it's best placed. Yeah. There is always a moment to be transparent, but it just depends on how much. Yeah. Because when you're managing people, everyone responds to things differently. Yeah. And that's why you have to look at every individual as an individual. So to be transparent with one individual looks different to be transparent to another. And you can't just do the same rules apply.
No.
Now, there is things that we are so transparent as a business around our numbers, our P&L, our profitability, everything. We share that monthly with our whole team through the ups, the downs, all the above. We've been lucky that we've had more ups and downs, but we've also had huge, steep learnings. I've got plenty of things wrong in the last 4 years, but that vulnerability to that point again, to be able to admit fault, but know you're going to work to find the answer, that's one part. But that is not transparency. Yeah. And I think transparency to me is something that as a leader, you have to perfect the speed of what you're doing or let's say perfect the gear that you shift into. Sure. Because sometimes when you might have the whole answer, but it's not the right time to say it transparently to a collective or an individual. And I think often people miss the mark there and that takes practice and experience. Yeah. Some people are better than others. Yeah. When you talk about limiting beliefs and other things too, is transparency just needs to be delivered in the right way, at the right time, in the right manner. And I think often that is confused, especially with vulnerability as well, because they're not associated.
They're not the same. Do you think that it's important then for leaders to be vulnerable?
I think it's really important for leaders to show what feels right to them, a certain level of vulnerability, but also I actually just think it's really admired from my own lived experience to admit fault when you get things wrong. I think if you can be vulnerable in that aspect, but also depending on the culture that you've created, if you create an environment that you will try and if you fail, that's okay. Yeah. Because that's a safe space too. Because if you're not trying, you'll never know what you can actually achieve. Yeah. And sometimes you will fail. You should fail, or else maybe you're just not really trying that hard.
Yeah, I think I had this conversation with someone on the podcast yesterday around the idea that I personally think that everybody's success is based on their relationship with failure. Yep. And I think that the more comfortable you are with failing, the more success you'll achieve because you're not scared of falling. And I think there's a whole heap of factors that come into creating a space that you feel comfortable at failing in. Like when I started my business, my parents were like, do whatever you want, try whatever you feel like. Like I had that kind of safety net of them being like, try it. Worst case scenario, you go back to working for somebody else. And that was a space that was created for me. But not everyone is afforded that privilege of having a safe space to fail. So what would you say, having created a space seemingly that, you know, your team feel comfortable with failing or trying and failing, what would you say are kind of the 3 things that a business or an organisation or an environment needs to have to create a space that's supporting of someone trying and then potentially failing?
Oh, you could answer that in so many different ways. I don't know if I have 3. Okay. I'll try my best.
Just give me like 1 or 2.
But I think the first one really needs to come back to you need to look at the type of leaders that you put in your positions first and foremost. The type of those individuals will actually set the agenda and the culture for what follows on. So obviously those that are in those hierarchical positions where they matter and where, you know, it makes sense to the company or the size of the company or whatever, no matter what level of company, I've seen it across all spectrums with the partners that we work with. How do they lead and what are the type of people, you know, and that is really critical. I had probably some really steep learnings in the last 12 months with hiring really senior leaders. Not that they weren't brilliant, they just weren't necessarily right for the mix of people that is what is going to realise Bullfrog's opportunity. Doesn't mean they're not great at what they do, they're just not right for Bullfrog, as I said at the start of this conversation. And that can really change a place. It can really change a place. Doesn't mean we weren't successful in the last 12 months or on paper we didn't grow.
Yeah.
It just wasn't the type of business that will allow us to achieve what we are truly chasing after.
Yeah.
And I think that is why the first point is it's critical in the leaders that you hire and what are their beliefs.
Yeah.
What is, if you're a founder or a CEO in that matter, what are the things that you want to run through that culture? Because if your leadership is not aligned, it will create those things, as I mentioned before, ambiguity, lack of clarity, and not consistency, and not a safe place to come back to.
Yeah.
So the second point is creating that safe place, creating a space of innovation. And forget that buzzword. Just to innovate, like innovation is just trying new things.
Yeah.
So just create an environment that allows people to try and not get caught out or not get, not feel that because they tried and they didn't necessarily measure up, that then they're not going to be allowed to try again.
Yeah.
And that comes to that safe space, but that comes to being okay to fail.
Yeah.
Now, failure is a really interesting word, yes, but once you own that trying piece, then equally you can have fun with it too.
Yeah.
I think sometimes we know life is not going to be fun. And that it just as much goes to what happens during our day at work as much as what happens outside of it. And so if you create an environment but you still have fun on the journey, I think often people look at the destination, but they're not happy to just do the walk. Because they're so worried about getting to there, they're actually forgetting the journey all the way through or just going on a long, slow walk.
Totally.
And I think when you enjoy the journey, it actually makes a big difference to the company's culture.
Yeah.
So those three things are simple. Think about your leadership and the type of people they are. Create an environment of trying.
Yeah.
Don't call it failure if that's a scary word, and it is a scary word to many. Reframe what that means. And just enjoy the journey and have fun with it.
Yeah.
Because it actually is a very high pressure environment and industry in advertising. It's hardworking, it's stressful. You know, our team is, let alone a lot of teams, are meticulous on the craft that is a millisecond in a TV ad as much as anything else. Yeah. I love that perfectionism in so many aspects, but often sometimes that's a barrier just to enjoying the journey.
Yeah.
And it's still brilliant
if
your expectations are set at the right level, but just have fun with it, enjoy the journey.
Yeah.
Don't know why I was just doing these
I
little
like
walkie fingers,
the
but go on the walk.
Yeah.
Too many people look at the destination and worry about that, but they just forget the walk is actually just as good.
Yeah. How do you enjoy the journey?
I think I protect space routinely to make sure I'm reflecting on what each week looks like, let alone what day.
Yeah.
Now, I don't have a journal that I write down and be great.
Yeah.
I don't do that. I've tried that. Doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
But I just find moments with myself, 10 minutes a day, nothing, just real quiet, no distraction. Normally it's morning after I've done some sort of vigorous exercise of some sort, and I just have 10 minutes by myself. I'm not actually doing anything. I'm not writing things down. I'm just reflecting on what not only I want to achieve for that day, but what am I also looking at that I can refine, or what I actually did well. I think sometimes we're so fast to be our own biggest critic, but when was it ever okay or not okay to be our own biggest cheerleader? Yeah. And I think society has missed a beat on that because we're just told to be critical on ourselves. And trust me, no one is more critical on the business than me, myself, and I. Yeah. However, I can also be my biggest cheerleader. Yeah. And I think people have forgotten that along the way. Yeah. And that's having fun, to that other point before, and telling everyone in your team is, be your cheerleader. Yeah. If you're proud of something, say it. Say it out loud. No matter how small you think it is, if that has brought you joy, own it. Yeah. But often it's that destination or the deadline or the project or everything being wrapped up in the most perfect way that actually stops people from starting or sharing.
Absolutely. And I think, I also think it's that relationship that, we see a lot of the time, especially in Australia. I had a conversation with Sophie Hood, who was a founder of Soul Tonic. She was on Gordon Ramsay's Food Stars, and she said she has this, innate feeling and like proof that it's actually happening around tall poppy syndrome, where people don't want to be their biggest cheerleaders because they know that there's someone waiting in the wings waiting to watch them fail. Yeah. And if they celebrate too loud and then 6 months later, they're they're not at that height of success that they were at. They're those people that are going to be sitting there waiting for them to be like, told you it wasn't going to work. Have you ever experienced tall poppy syndrome?
Every day.
Really? Do you have an example you can share with me?
I'm also a founder that didn't come from a very prestigious industry, somehow doing okay in a really incredible industry.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are waiting for me to fail. Do I care? No. I think often I've said this for always is focus, yes, on what I can control and always can control the controllables. But I think you have to be prepared, be a founder or a leader, especially a leader can be really isolating. Yeah. You have to be okay. There's this wonderful quote from Alex Hormozy and it's not even just a quote, it's just a moment and scenario is that you have to be prepared for the long, slow clap in a lonely auditorium.
Yeah.
And it will go and you'll clap and clap. And maybe one day lots of people will clap too.
Yeah.
But it's okay if you're the only one clapping. And I think there's something really beautiful in that.
Yeah.
Because it is lonely.
Yeah.
And it's really tough. And I think sometimes people underestimate how tough it can be. But sometimes you have to stumble your way through to work it out. And often to the point that I said before, people wait for everything to be perfectly lined up before even starting. And some of the smartest people in the world could have achieved some of the wildest things, but they never start because they're waiting for the perfect moment. Yeah. But sometimes you just have to be okay with clapping by yourself.
Yeah.
And if you worry about what the rest of the world thinks, you're probably not focusing on what's right in front of you.
Yeah.
And I think that in itself has probably been my biggest, as someone that has only been self-employed. It's probably on reflection, they're the moments I actually love the most. I'm in them right now.
Yeah.
I'm sort of always in them, whether it's my 10 minutes in the morning.
Yeah.
It comes back to being your biggest cheerleader, but also acknowledging that it can take time. Yeah. And it doesn't mean I'm alone. I've got an incredible team.
Yeah.
A lot of people that I'm accountable for to make sure they achieve their life success, whatever that may be. But that long, slow clap can be a really great journey if you just recognize it for what it is and not worry about the pat on the back from everything, because I've been so lucky for this team to be recognized for their brilliance at an incredible level. But I'm more lucky of what the respect internally they have for each other and our partners too.
Yeah.
Because people don't see that. They might guess it. They might say people first. They might say you're doing all these great things or category leading policies and other things too to change the way the industry shapes. But that is fueled by those people because of what they care about. And that in itself is one of the biggest things I'm most grateful for of being a founder, yes, but also just being a part of some really smart people and having respect for each other and doing so. Yeah. But be prepared for that really slow clap.
Yeah, it is lonely. I mean, I think there's days where I certainly sit there and I'm like, God, I'd love a co-founder, like just to bounce ideas off. I'm like, I spend a lot of time just talking to myself because I'm like, if you see me talking to myself, I'm having a staff meeting with just me, like business partner meeting, right? Because you do just bounce those ideas off yourself. And some days I wish I had a co-founder. Then I hear awful co-founder stories and I'm like, I'm glad I don't have a co-founder. What's one thing that you wish you knew prior to starting Bullfrog? If you could go back and be like, hey, Dalton, don't forget this. What's one thing that you would tell yourself?
Trust your instinct.
Oh, I resonate with that hard. Yeah. Trust your gut.
Yeah, I overanalyze every detail.
Yeah.
Or let's say not over. I analyze every detail because I appreciate every detail. Doesn't necessarily mean the detail will stop me on progress. Yeah. And that's a learned skill over time. However, I'm always perfecting it. I think if I look at my last 12 months, my instinct weirdly has been right every time. But my brain, me, let's say, being analytical over every detail, the rational has got in front of the emotional, whatever it might be, has led to decisions that, we sort of spoke about just prior to coming on the air, but sometimes trusting your gut is the smartest decision. But often we don't trust our gut because we're looking at, oh, this could be the right way, or this is how it's sort of been done before, but it could be this, or I could hire this person and I'll get X or Y. But ultimately, if it's not right in your gut, and one of my team members, one of my leadership team members, he's like, your instinct's right the first time, just go with that, please. But that's a nice person in my corner. Like he is my cheerleader.
Yeah.
And he is saying, you were right on the first thought. Thank you for sharing your thought, but that's wrong and that's right. In his view.
Yeah.
But he said, he's one of these things. We did a bit of a, let's say a leadership team exercise the other day, and it was very much around what are the expectations we have for each other. Bit of great expectations, little bit type of thing. And one of the sticky notes from this same individual, and this is a little time ago, and he said it again this week, just trust your instinct. Trust your gut.
Yeah.
Because that's why we're all here.
Totally.
And that is rare to the point of being lonely, and that slow clap. You should not expect pats on the back. I don't look for them. It's super nice to hear, and I'm very grateful when I hear it. However, it comes back to being our own biggest critic as much as our own cheerleader too, to get that feedback to drive an outcome, which is my responsibility as the CEO of the company, is to make sure we're always profitable, we're growing, and we're looking after our people, and our product is only getting better and better day in, day out. And so, trust your instinct.
Yeah, trust your gut.
You might just have a better answer than someone else.
Yeah, I think, God, I resonate with that so much because I, for many years, struggled with anxiety. And I think as someone who is anxious, and I talk about anxiety now quite openly because I think that it's one of those things, I liken it to, carrying a rock in your backpack. It's like the first time the rock goes in the backpack, you feel it and you're like, God, this is fucking heavy, right? And then over time you learn to carry that backpack with you and it becomes a little bit lighter, but it's only because you've got stronger or you've learned to carry it better. But it doesn't actually go away, right? You learn to live with it. But I think for a large part of my career, I put my anxious thoughts or my overthinking or overanalyzing, and it forced me to question my gut because I was like, am I overthinking this, right? You have that gut instinct and then you go, no, I'm overthinking it. Then you think about all these other things and you come to a different conclusion. And there was actually a study done recently around couples that were great on paper versus gut instinct. And the couples that were great on paper, their relationship lasted 60% shorter than the couples that were together based on gut instinct. And I think it's so fascinating because your gut's like, they say, your second brain, right? Is there anything that your gut has told you before you've realised it?
The fast answer is there is so many answers to that question.
Yeah.
And it would be hard to just pick one.
Yeah.
Pick one that doesn't necessarily, it probably doesn't do justice to the amount of times that happens on a daily basis. And I think if I was to think of one moment, it would actually make all the other moments feel not equal.
Yeah.
And because I think often the decision doesn't need to be a big decision for it to be the right one too. Sure. And while I think of one, like one just popped in yesterday, however, I'm like, I've probably had 5 or 6 this morning as well. Yeah. Inherently, where I just naturally feel different about an outcome or different about, it's not just making assumptions, but it's just this feeling of what could be. Yeah. And maybe I need to go explore that. Yeah. And I do that every day. I do trust my gut a lot. On the bigger decisions, we like to overthink them. Yeah. But sometimes they're just decisions. And I think you need to make fast decisions, learn from them fast and move forward. Doesn't mean they failed. No. You've just learned. Yeah. And I think often we skip past that learning or that reflection point, as I shared with you before. Yeah. And I think if you are learning from those decisions and what are the right and, let's say, maybe wrong ones or ones that could be better, I think if you don't make decisions, it comes back to that perfectionist piece once again. Yeah. Is it will actually limit the opportunity that you can create. So make fast decisions. Yeah. Be okay with making fast decisions. Be your gut, the head or the heart. It doesn't really matter. Yeah. but make them fast. So you can learn from them fast.
Yeah.
And they might just work out. You know, it's another great quote that I was thinking about the other day is often people think it's a big, deep, dark ocean to jump into some really scary things, but often people put their first step in and it's not that scary.
Yeah.
And then they walk in a little bit further and it's not that deep.
Yeah.
And as they keep going, they realize that's not that scary. That's not that deep. That's not that challenging. I can take another step. You just got to take the step. So make the decision and make the move and make the progress. Move forward.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big part of often anyone starting a company, but also anyone in any business, no matter if you're in a leadership position or not. Make the decision. If you're in the right environment, they'll applaud you for it or they'll work with you to find the better way to make the next best decision.
Yeah, I like the idea of, I feel very similar to that in the sense that, making quick decisions is the best way to do it because the time's going to pass anyway, right? I think Barack Obama talks about it and he talks about making a decision based on 51% facts. Yeah. Right? He's like, you'll never have more than that in that time.
Great one.
Make a decision in 51% facts and then you'll know that at that point that you've made it knowing that it was the right decision at that point in time. And he talks about that when they took out Osama bin Laden and he only had 51% of the facts before he made a decision to enter. Now, slight change of tact. Marketing agencies, media agencies, creative agencies, professional services are typically really shocking at marketing themselves.
Yeah.
The irony is not lost on me that 40% of our clients are other marketing agencies, right? How do you go about marketing your services?
I think it's one of the big reasons to the point of potentially the assumptions you can make or what you read online because you've been so well researched in coming into this conversation, which I deeply appreciate. It's you can draw assumptions based on the brand you built.
Yeah.
The reason for Bullfrog's growth to date is because we've built a really interesting employer brand or brand. You have to build a brand even though you're doing it for someone else. It's that old silly saying, it's like the plumber with the leaky tap.
Yeah.
You should build your brand and what you believe in because that's also what clients and partners are buying into as well. That's what they experience, they're expecting. And you have to live up to that experience. And I think the biggest part is if you don't think of yourself as a brand, no matter what category you're in, any business, not just professional service, any business, you're selling yourself short of an opportunity that you might not know it actually exists.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest thing that is Bullfrog is we've had so much impact in a really positive way in the community, and that's led by incredible people in the team, but it's also led by us and the shared beliefs that are in the team of what impact we want to leave or the legacy we want to create and other things as well. And that then fuels into our brand. And our brand as a business is one, as you've sort of called out, it is very much people first, but it is a place of high standard and expectation. And that's why we are very happy, everyone who's in the team, to say we're not for everyone.
Yeah.
Because we're not going to just do the status quo. Yeah. And you will find some really interesting things that you won't have an answer to just yet. But this team will find an answer in probably an unexpected way. And often those ways, and I look at it across some of the most brilliant work that we've done, it's often those type of complex problems that if you're just solving them in a box like advertising or let's say sometimes professional services do in a really waterfall, methodical way, you probably wouldn't have got the right answer or the answer wouldn't have been as impactful. So I think if you're not building your own employer brand, no matter what business you are, or you're not thinking about it as a really key attribute to how you grow, I think you're just leaving some things off the table, and I think I would implore anyone, let alone my good mates who have got their own trades business or whatever it might be, they're just leaving something off the table because the world of where it comes to trust, first thing people look up, whether it's online, phone, Instagram, is what is the people behind it, what do they believe in? Yeah. They feel like a safe bet.
Totally.
So if you're not doing it.
Well, I think there was also a recent stat that came out that there's like brands that have a poor employer brand or like an unrecognizable brand in market pay 20% more for a salary than a brand that doesn't, or that does have a strong employer brand, And it makes sense, right? Because if people buy into the idea of who you are, what you do, why you're doing it, people want to work there.
Yeah.
They're not having to be convinced to work there. Whereas brands that have a less of a brand or no brand at all, are having to sell every time they engage somebody or a future employee to work for them or work with them. And now I know you've spoken extensively around your team and the accolades that they've kind of got, but you've also had some accolades for yourself.
You better not go down this path. I hate talking about myself.
Well, we're going to.
Okay,
for a
great.
split second, we're
Amazing.
going to.
Yes, go.
You were recognised in Media Week's top 50 most influential and powerful creative leaders. That's right.
Yeah.
Coming in at 25.
Yep.
I'm reminding you of all the things that you're just like, let's not talk about these things.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening. If you loved this conversation, don't forget to tune in to our next episode to hear part 2. Don't forget to review and subscribe if you are loving this content.